Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. So my name is Mark Britton, and I'm the marketing manager for the Syngenta potato portfolio. During the course this week, Syngenta will be running a series of virtual potato science live meetings, which I will chair each day. As you're aware, today's topic is seed and soil-borne pathogens, and the Syngenta presenters for today are Michael Tait and Harry Fordham. I thought it would be useful to also give a reminder of the sessions that we've lined up for the rest of the week. So tomorrow we've got soil pest management with Michael Tait and Max Newbert. On Wednesday we have blight management, and that's with Michael Tait and Harry Fordham again. On Thursday it's a session on biostimulants with Michael Tait, and on Friday we have a sustainability session with Belinda Bailey and Max Newbert. So if you'd like to attend any of these sessions but you haven't registered yet, then there is still time to register. You can visit the events page of the Syngenta UK website. Before I hand over to Michael, I've just got a slide on housekeeping really. The Syngenta, as the host, will record the webinar via Zoom, and the recording will be published on the Syngenta UK TV YouTube channel. That'll be after the event. No recording by anyone else or by any other means is permitted. If you have any questions, then please submit them using the Q&A function, so not via chat. So it's the Q&A function for that, please. And we'll send an email tomorrow with information on how to apply for BASIS and also for Enroso points, as well as including a link to a feedback survey. So with that, I will hand over to Michael.
Good morning, everybody, on this fairly chilly morning. Welcome to the event. I'm Michael Tait, Technical Manager looking after potato products and veg products at Syngenta in the UK. So this morning, what I'm going to do is to talk through one of our products that's been on the market for a while, but I think changes in the regulatory environment in terms of the number of active ingredients that are used as tuber treatments being lost have meant that there's a kind of a new emphasis on people looking for liquid applications as an opposed to historically when they may have used dust treatments for their tubers. So hopefully this will be of interest for you and will encourage you to consider in the future making use of a liquid tuber application on your potatoes. So the product is based on Fluorescenil, and I say it has been in the market for a number of years. We claim control of Rhizoctonia, and we claim reduction against Helminthosporum, silver scurf, and Cholecalciferum, black dot. There is also an EMU for use on scab, particularly if you're exporting potato seed tubers to the Mediterranean area. The product is applied during grading out, so this is the time of year when many people will be thinking of doing this. And basically the main way that it's working is to prevent disease spreading from seed tubers onto the progeny, onto the daughter tubers that you're going to harvest as your crop. The rate of use is a single rate of use, 250 mils per ton of seed tubers, and only one batch is allowed. And the label states planting to dormant tubers, and we do encourage people to use this on healthy stocks rather than heavily diseased stocks, because often those are going to give disappointing results anyway. The method of application is via a hood, which is in a roller table. I'm going to say quite a bit more about that in a minute, because one of the things that we've always been very keen on with this product is good stewardship. Good stewardship to enable the product to get onto the tubers properly, and good stewardship to enable you to get a good result and not be disappointed with the performance in the field. So application's really important, and it's something we've worked with one of our distributors in particular, Frontier, over the last few years. Water volume or mix volume, really I should say there, between 1 and 2 litres per tonne, because the idea is to get the product onto the tubers, but you don't really want damp, soggy tubers. Now, Fluorescenil, as I said, it's been around for a while. It's an extremely active material as a seed treatment in a number of different uses, and it basically interferes with the energy process, production of energy within the fungi, and brings about disruption of the fungus's ability to function and to transport things across membranes. So it works very well, but it's primarily a contact fungicide. It's not systemic as some fungicides are. Now, really, good application is absolutely the key. And we worked very closely a number of years ago with team sprayers in developing new technology in order to optimize treatment of tubers. So here you can see a visual where you've got inside the treatment hood, you've got the roller tables across which the tubers will pass. You've got a rotating arm with a nozzle on it. Some of these arms now have 2 nozzles rather than 1, because that further improves the application within the treatment area. So that nozzle on that whole arm will rotate round and therefore turn the nozzle. So as the tubers pass underneath the treatment area, they get nicely treated. Now, when I first came into the industry and I worked for MSD when we were looking at application of storite many years ago, there were some fairly Heath Robinson type approaches to treating seed tubers. The Mantex spinning disc applicator was around and quite widely used, but tended to produce rather uneven results. We could produce more even results with hydraulic nozzles, but in those days, people were often not very conscious of the need to protect operators and to have properly designed hoods. And also another very important factor when treating seed tubers with this sort of technology is that the presentation of those tubers to the treatment area has to be in a nice continuous flow. It's no good having a sudden surge of tubers under the spray area and then no tubers and just spraying empty rollers. What you need to do is to have a system that will enable a continuous steady flow to pass underneath the spray hood where you can do effective treatment. And that's where we work with team sprayers to develop this hood technique. So inside there, you've got the rotating arm. Typically, you've also got fans on the top of the hood, which gently push the spray deposits down onto the tubers as they pass through underneath. So again, I haven't got a working video, but you can see here you've got the machine spraying. That arm will rotate, and again you get nice even coverage, and this is the sort of coverage that we're looking to try to achieve, and this sort of nozzle again is less likely to block than things like the Mantis or some of the earlier hydraulic systems, where because you've got very low flow rates you can quite easily get blockages, and you have to keep an eye on them because you are obviously working in what can be quite a dusty atmosphere as dust comes off the stored tubers. So we have done some work in the past looking to compare this team sprayer's nozzle with other application techniques, and generally we were able to show that you can get a higher level of deposition on the target tubers than you can with other techniques. So it's one of the reasons why over the years since its initial introduction we've supported using this technique with Maxim 100. As I say, you can either buy the equipment yourselves, set up your own system, or there is capacity within to do some mobile treatments, and so far Frontier have been very active in this area. But again, as I say, you can buy your own equipment, particularly going forward when the options in terms of dust application may be far more limited. It may be well worth the investment to have your own equipment and to be in control of what you're doing. So just to say a little bit now about some of the diseases, and I'll then give you just a few results. I'm not going to give you a great number of charts or things like that, just a few to illustrate the activity of the product. So I guess one of the most important pathogens that we're active against is Rhizoctonia salinity, the causative organism for stem canker and black scurf. Now this disease is spread both on seed tubers and also it is prevalent in soils. I'm sure you'll all be aware of the sort of problems it leads to with uneven growth, tuber cracking. The uneven growth is a problem particularly for the processing sector, and the black scurf symptoms on the tuber more of a problem for the pre-pack area. So again, quite a few issues associated with Rhizoctonia salinity. Now this is some results from France, because the French have done more work recently involving Maxim than we have done in the UK. A lot of our work is a few years old now, so I thought for this meeting it would be interesting to present some results from my French colleagues. And you can see from this, you've got here the untreated. This is the percentage of the tubers here. Sorry, I got that wrong. This is the percentage of the tubers here with black scurf, the untreated here. Monstrum Pro, which is a product which is fairly common in continental Europe, combination of pensacuron and tebuconazole, and Maxim here. You can see both being very effective against Rhizoctonia in these French trials. There's a mean of 7 trials. The other disease which we are active against is Helminthosporum, silver scurf. This is mainly an issue for the pre-pack industry, creating a tuber which has got a lot of damage on the surface, which is not so attractive for the consumer, but also in storage. If you've got very severe silver scurf, you can get additional loss of water and dehydration of the tubers, which again makes them less sort of attractive for the consumption point of view. Again, I'm looking here at some French trials because they have the most recent data. Again, this is looking at the percentage of tubers that are infected at harvest. So again, it comes back to you're treating the seed tuber to reduce the amount of disease on the harvested tuber. So again, this is looking at the harvested tubers from 11 trials. Again, a standard we're not so familiar with here in Britain, but again, very good activity against Helminthosporum from Maxim 100 in these trials. And finally, just to say a little bit about Coleototricum cacoides, black dot. Very, very common disease now. I know when I first came into the industry, a lot of time was spent on trying to distinguish between silver scurf and black dot. Not so easy to do initially, but now I think a lot of people are fully familiar with how to do this. It's both seed and soil-borne. Unfortunately, an awful lot of our potato growing soils now have their own population of black dot. But again, transmission by seed is still important. It tends to develop towards the latter part of the crop's life cycle. So as it starts the senesce, you get the black dot sclerotia forming on stems and also obviously on the tubers. And these tubers then have a lower value, particularly in pre-pack. Now, this is based on data from the UK. These are 5 trials that we ran looking at black dot over this period, 2016-2017. And here we've included rhino as a comparison. And this side of the chart here shows you the level of infection in the harvested tubers, so around 40%. And this is percent control on this side of the black line. So you can see here we've achieved in these 5 trials a really good level of control with Maxim 100. And just to hone down onto one of those trials that were in those 5, in that mean of 5 trial sets of data, and to look at the comparisons in that trial. The trial was run in Scotland. And you can see here, you've got here the level of black dot in harvested progeny in the untreated. You've got the activity from Monstrum, Rhino, and Maxim against black dot. So again, very good level of reduction in the amount of disease on the harvested tubers following the use of Maxim. But I would emphasize that it will only really effectively fully control seed-borne disease. So if you have a lot of pressure from soil-borne disease as well, then it may be that you need additional treatment. And that's where something like Amistar comes in to the equation. So I'm just going to give you a couple of results on Amistar and Maxim, and using these 2 materials to get the optimum activity against seed and soil-borne disease. The first result here is the more important of the 2, because it shows, again, data from France. And if you look across here on the left-hand side, you've got the untreated with quite a high level of disease. Then you've got activity from Monstrum Pro, Maxim on its own, Amistar on its own, and the 2 combined. So I think you can see from this chart that while you had seed-borne disease, because you've got very good activity from the maxim, there was undoubtedly some soil-borne disease element as well. So when you combine the two, you're getting an additional sort of benefit there. Now, Helminthosporum is regarded as being seed-borne, but you can see in this particular pair of French trials, using Amistar with Maxim has also helped to improve the activity. So again, there must be some effect from the Amistar as well as from the Maxim. But I've used this really as to bring my sort of talk to Maxim to a close, and also to then leave the floor open to my colleague Harry Fordham to talk to you a bit about the use of Amistar in-furrow and the work that has been carried out in recent years to look at how to optimize the efficiency of Amistar as an in-furrow treatment. So I'd just like to now pass over to Harry.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well and not too cold. We've had about 2 or 3 inches of snow here in Essex, and the Met Office says it feels like -7, so it's pretty chilly. I'm here as my role, which is New Farming Technologies Lead for the Northwest Business Unit in the UK. And my role is to look at application technology and future developments that we can look at to ensure that operators and growers and advisors give the best possible advice on using our products. And last year, I may have presented to you about some of the results we've had on up-to-date Amistar in-furrow trials, and we thought we'd build on that going forward. So we did a year's trial last year, and this is following up on the work we had done and how we can improve Amistar in-furrow application. So to start off with, why are we doing this? Why are we looking at Amistar in-furrow application? It's been around for about 20 years, and you know, we thought, well, we've got to have a look at advice from 20 years ago and see if it's still relevant now. But we're getting feedback from growers and operators that we've got bigger planters on bigger tractors. They can go at higher forward speeds with our belt planters nowadays. And as a result, we're getting quite a lot of drift because the pressure is going quite high. And also, there's new nozzle technology around and about in the market, and we thought we'd look into that as well. Not only that, we got a notification from our manufacturing colleagues in Hypro Pentair that manufacture the Syngenta branded nozzles, that they were discontinuing the Amistar in-furrow nozzle. So we've also got to bear that in mind. And if you guys are looking to replace nozzles or buy new ones, there are a few that are still left in the market, but they will be running out shortly and won't be replaced. So we've got to look at other options for growers to use. So the trial objectives were threefold, really. We were looking at 3 different hypotheses. We were looking at whether 50 litres or 100 litres a hectare of water was better, looking at the different nozzle selection and how that can affect both efficacy and drift reduction, and then also how setup affects both growth, because growth of the potato plants themselves, and then obviously disease control, and ultimately maximising our marketable yield going forward. So when I say talking about setup, we were looking at whether we would have nozzles at the front and rear of the planting shoe, or both at the rear of the planting shoe. And when we're using Amistar, we've got to remember that we put it in with the planter around the mother tuber in the middle here, with the hope that the Amistar will move through the soil and work in this zone of activity, and you can see then protecting the daughter tubers from diseases such as Rhizoctonia, black dot, and silver scurf. This was just a review of the trials that we did last year. So on the left-hand side, This was untreated, so just water. And then in this sort of group of three, that's with the old Amistar nozzle. And then the one in the middle would be the sort of current advice. So one at the front and one at the rear of the planting shoe. And then here you can see this is with a hollow cone nozzle, a Leckler hollow cone nozzle. This was a drift reduction hollow cone nozzle. And this was a drift reduction hollow cone nozzle, but at a smaller orifice, so at a higher pressure, using probably having higher levels of droplet numbers coming out of the nozzle. And you can see we got really encouraging results, both at the rear and at the front and the rear, using the hollow cone nozzle and the hollow cone nozzle at a higher pressure as well. So what did we test this year? We had a look at, again, untreated, so water, just seeing if there are any effects from the Amistar on the potatoes. We again looked at 50 litres a hectare, and then majority of our treatments were 100 litres a hectare, using Amistar in-furrow nozzles, so the standard, as you'll all know, the brass Amistar in-furrow nozzle, the Leckler hollow cone TR80, and I'll show you a picture of what that looks like in a moment, the ITR80, and then this is a setup here that has been used by our German colleagues for a few years, which is the Leckler FT90, but you'll notice they have a different size at the front to the back. The idea being 1/3 of the dose is at the front and 2/3 is at the back. So we have an O1 nozzle at the front and an O2 nozzle at the back, giving us 100 litres a hectare. So I thought it'd be worth just giving an overview to all of you of what the nozzles look like and how they work. So this is the old Amistar in-furrow brass nozzle that I'm sure many of you will know and love and recognise. And what we recommended was the 0062 for 50 litres a hectare and the 0124 for 100 litres a hectare, both the same size at the front and back of the planting shoe. They're a brass nozzle, so therefore hard wearing, but the droplet size was small and the drift potential is high. And you can see in this little video at the bottom here, we do get good coverage on either side of the furrow, and that means that when the soil gets folded in back here, it's got good protection around the potato. And then this is the Leckler TR80 nozzle. So this is a standard hollow cone nozzle. It's a ceramic orifice, and you can see the nice hollow cone shape that we have here. It works similarly to most hollow cone nozzles, originally developed for vineyard and orchard application, and it gives us a 80-degree fan angle, which means that we get really good deposition on either side of the furrow, which you can see here in the little video. It doesn't have any drift reduction capability, but it is a slightly coarser droplet than with the Amistar nozzle. We've looked at the same size either on the left and right or front and back of the planting shoe, so 015 to get 100 litres a hectare. Due to the hollow cone nature, as you can see here, we get good coverage on either side of the furrows, so when the soil folds back in, we get good even coverage and deposition around the daughter tuber. Bigger orifice than the Amistar nozzle, so less likely to block, and also ceramic orifice. So you can see here that it's hard wearing and should last for quite a long time. And then the Leckler ITR80 nozzle. So you can see again, this is another hollow cone nozzle, another ceramic tip nozzle. But as this picture shows here, it is an air induction nozzle. So it does offer some drift reduction and can offer up to 90% drift reduction if used at the correct pressures. This was developed again as a step up from the TR80 nozzle, which was for orchard and vineyard spraying using a drift reduction element. It's an 80-degree fan angle. And again, we used size 015 at both front and back, and as you can see here, left and right of the planting shoe. So it's big orifice, less likely to block, and it may allow growers to go faster whilst reducing drift and still giving a level of drift reduction. And then last but not least, this is an image of the Leckler FT90 nozzle, which is the setup our German colleagues use. And this has been produced specifically for band application methods. It's a 90-degree fan angle, and you can see here where the fan is created off a sort of splash plate type effect. It's very unlikely to block because it's got a big orifice, and that orifice is also well sheltered by the bottom of the nozzle here. It is a pre-orifice nozzle, and that means it can offer levels of drift reduction. The pre-orifice is in here, which allows the momentum of the liquid to slow down, which means that we get bigger droplets coming out of the end of the nozzle, which offers our drift reduction. And here you can see how the German colleagues have it set up. This is on a Grimmy planter, and we have at the front that green O1 nozzle, and at the back the O2 in blue there. And you can see that allows us to put a third at the front and 2/3 at the back of the planting shoe. So that's what we were looking at, different nozzles. We also thought we'd look at different nozzle setups, as I said before. So we were asking whether we should put both at the back or one at the front and one at the back. And here you can see an example of the Amistar nozzle at the front. This year, we were fortunate enough to have 2 trial sites, both managed by VCS, who again did a fantastic job, and many thanks to James, Graham and the team there. But one in Norfolk, one in Suffolk, 2 different planters this time, which is great because it allows us to build up our knowledge and database around that. Different varieties, we've got a main crop variety and an early variety, both harvested at a similar time of year, with the Charlotte desiccated quite a bit earlier. So I thought initially I'd show you the different levels of ground cover. So this was at site A, and untreated on the left-hand side here. Amistar having a slight impact on emergence, but they all reached 100% level of emergence by 23rd of June. So slightly minimal, but they all caught up in good time. And at site B, we actually saw with the Amistar, again, you can see even compared to untreated, it didn't affect it at all. And again, by the 23rd of June, they had all got 100% ground cover, all the different application methods. So this is site A, and remember this was on Maris Piper. And you can see here that we've got untreated on the far left-hand side, and there was great levels of disease control, no matter how we applied it. But even that 50 litres a hectare performing as the least good in terms of disease control. But all the nozzles are performing pretty well in comparison to the Amistar in-furrow. Maybe the drift reduction one offering a little bit less, but the German setup providing good disease control too. When that came through to marketable yield, so remember this is the important bit, this is the reason we're using Amistar, is to stop skin diseases or reduce skin diseases. But what's good here is we've got untreated on the left-hand side. All of the applications, apart from 50 litres a hectare, are significantly different. So the Amistar in-furrow here, the old advice, but we've got really good levels of control and good levels of yield using the TR80 nozzle, so the non-air induction version, both front and rear of the planter. The ITR, so the air induction nozzle, offering slightly less levels of control, with the German setup providing really good levels of control and again a significant result there. In site B, so this was this is on the Maris Piper. The previous result was on the Charlotte, and this is looking at silver scurf, and you can see untreated again is performing less good. All of the treatments were giving a positive result, and then when we came through to looking at the nozzles, we were getting again significant results using all applications. 50 litres a hectare in this circumstance seemed to work okay, but I think that's a bit of an anomaly when we look at the data. But again, the Leckler hollow cone TR80 nozzle, both front and rear, performing really well. Both at the rear performing not quite so good, but not too bad. And then ITR80, so the air induction nozzle, performing less good than the standard hollow cone. And then the FT90 here on the right-hand side, the German setup, not disappointing at all. So in summary of the trials, I thought it'd be good to, give some advice and a conclusion to what we would advise in terms of application technique. Now, we did select the sites because of high black dot pressure. We seem to get more black dot in site A than we did in site B. But you can see Amistar was giving good levels of control of black dot and silver scurf. 100 litres a hectare performed the best, largely across both sites in both year 1 and year 2. The Leckler TR80 nozzle performed consistently well in both year 1 and again in year 2. The front and rear orientation appears to give the best results more regularly. And the hollow cone nature of that nozzle means that blocking is less likely. The German setup, which was the Leckler FT90 01 and 02, gave a very good result in both situations, and we would be happy with that. And I would suggest that is what we would recommend in compromised situations. So if you know you're going to be using high forward speeds on your planter, then the FT90 could be a good resolution for that. Otherwise, if you're not going to be going so fast, that TR80 nozzle has performed well in both year 1 and in both sites in year 2, with that front rear orientation appearing to be the best. If you really want to put both nozzles at the back of the planting shoe, you saw the results were slightly slightly worse off than front and back, but only a little bit and not significantly different. So I'm now going to pass back to my colleague Mark, who is hopefully going to lead the question and answer session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Michael and Harry. So we have had a few questions come in. We've got one that's come in that's quite specific to an individual, so we'll probably pick that one up offline and make contact with them direct. I think a bit of discussion there probably needed, probably not right for this forum. I had another question then, so this is probably for Michael. So do you check the soil and seed tubers for levels of disease before planting?
Sorry, Mark, I didn't quite catch that. Just say again.
Sorry. So do you check the soil and seed tubers for levels of disease before planting?
I think that's quite a tricky one to answer, because I mean, checking the seed tubers is pretty straightforward. There are a number of organizations that can do that for you. There is, I think, or there are some systems available for checking for soil-borne diseases, but they are much less widely deployed. And I think at least some of the diseases, for example, black dot, if you've grown potatoes in a particular area for a number of years, there's a very good chance you will have black dot. So I think it's partly a matter of knowing the soils, but I'm not quite sure how much it would cost to have soil assessments of soil-borne disease carried out. I know SIUC do some of that, but I'm not sure how widely it's carried out. So possibly, but generally, I think soil-borne disease is more down to local knowledge of fields and things, rather than going out and testing. And all testing like of this type is a bit like Potato-cyst nematode, is that how many samples do you need to take in order to get a good analysis? So it's a tricky one, that one. Obviously, the seed tube is pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Michael. So we've got a couple of questions now for Harry. So Harry, a question came in. What would be your preferred replacement for the Amistar nozzle, and where are these available?
So based on that work that I just presented, we would suggest the Leckler TR80 hollow cone nozzle, as that's performed regularly well, both in year 1 and year 2. However, if you're going at the higher forward speeds, and when I noticed there's a question about forward speed, we looked at a range from 6 up to 10 kilometers an hour. And I would suggest if you're going above 8 kilometers an hour, so the pressure's going up sort of to 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 bar, we would talk about using the Leckler FT90, which will offer a level of drift reduction. The availability of those nozzles is relatively wide. When we've done the trials, I've not had any issues with supply. I think if you just ask your normal nozzle supplier, then they should be able to sort it out. And in terms of pricing, they're anywhere between about £3 and £5 each, so not too expensive either.
Thank you, Harry. So another question. So is the recommendation for Amistar still not to allow contact with the seed at application point?
I think this is one that the industry's been familiar with for some time. You'll have seen in the information that Harry presented that if you put Amistar onto the tubers, you do slightly slow up the speed at which they grow, and you are playing a balance of risk in that you will improve the quality of the tubers, but initial emergence may be slowed slightly by contact. So we've always recommended, and we're not going to change our general recommendation to minimize contact as much as possible, because there's an old saying about it's the dose that makes the poison, so to speak. So yeah, well, I think we will continue to say, keep the tubers, don't directly target the tubers, you're targeting the soil. A small amount getting on the tubers is almost inevitable and will likely cause a small check, which is then outgrown. And the benefit is that the quality of the tubers that you're growing will be higher. So that's the equation that we're making.
Thank you, Michael. So we have another question, well, more of a comment actually, but it'd be useful to give you a view on it. So the comment is 100 litres per hectare does cause problems with less output, having to refill more often, have more water in the field for refilling.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a compromise, and I think if you've seen me do presentations before, I have a nice little Venn diagram which has 3 factors: efficiency, efficacy, and environment. And it's every part of what we do in agriculture is a compromise. And I think with application, if we know we can maximize efficacy at 100 litres a hectare, then that's great. But if you are willing to maximize output from the planter and know that the application isn't going to work quite as well, then that's up to you. But I think from the work we've done consistently, 100 litres a hectare performs best. But we understand that their days are short and output is a limiting factor. So yeah, I mean, it's a good comment, but we're just trying to demonstrate the best possible result using our product at 100 litres a hectare.
Thank you. So another question. So one person here has requested Maxim treat with seed from their seed supplier, but the seed house says they'd rather not do it. They're saying that the best place to do it is when I receive the seed on farm and to decant into bags. What's your view on that?
I think there are, for the industry as a whole, some issues with changing or moving to more liquid applications. There are going to need to be changes in the way that people handle seed, the way that they store. In the past, it's been relatively straightforward. There've been a lot of dust products available. You can chuck them on as you plant, not really a problem. Whereas it's true that with liquid seed treatments, you have to plan ahead, you have to have more handling capacity, you have to have more storage capacity. So there isn't any way around that. It will require a bit of a change in mindset if you want to make use of these products, which can really help you with the quality of the progeny tubers. So yeah, I think there's not a straightforward, easy answer. You do have to have additional handling capabilities.
Thank you. So we've got one more question. So I'll probably use this before I ask the question as an opportunity just to remind everybody that if you wish to ask a question, there's a Q&A function. So please submit that. Because I guess if we don't have any more after this final question, that's on the screen at the moment, then we'll wrap up. So please feel free to send in any more questions via the Q&A section. So the final question we have at the moment is, have we any efficacy data regarding seed treatments and or Amistar regarding soil moisture at the time of planting and the following weeks?
I think the kind of the short answer to that is no, in that we've not specifically retained or tracked soil moisture at time of planting. I mean, historically, we know that very cold, damp seed beds, potatoes planted into those sort of conditions can struggle with emergence a bit. So I think that's probably quite widely known. But have we collected data specifically on that with Amistar and Maxim? No, we haven't.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So it has prompted a few more questions. So can I request treatment of my seed without looking at it?
I guess you can. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I don't see why not. I mean, I think it makes sense to understand the quality of the seed that you're buying and whether or not the need for a seed treatment is likely. but I think that's up to you and the supplier.
Somewhat linked to that question is the who writes the recommendation?
No, I don't quite follow that. Who do you mean? Who writes the recommendation? What, for the seed treatment?
I'm assuming, yeah, it's just who writes the recommendation. So I'm assuming that is for the seed treatment.
Yeah, I assume it'll be for the supplier, the distributor who's supplying the product for application.
Okay. So how far ahead of planting can you treat seed with Maxim without losing efficacy?
This is a question that's quite difficult to answer, but at the moment, the label says that you have to treat or plant the seed within 90 days of treatment. But we do have data, and we are developing more data that shows that you can treat seeds successfully much earlier than that and get control of a Rhizoctonia. The main issues that you have are, what is the quality and the situation of the seed when you treat it? If it's reasonably clean and it's well stored, then you can treat much earlier than we currently have on the label. We know that. The issue comes if you try and treat tubers that are already carrying quite a lot of mud and dirt, because Fluorescenil is basically contact material. If you apply it to a lot of dirt and the dirt falls off, then you no longer have it in contact with the tuber. So that's the kind of the main issue about how long the product will last, rather than necessarily the chronological time. It's more the condition that you treat under rather than actual time itself, because tubers tend to be stored in the dark, Fluorescenil won't be degraded, and so you get good efficacy against the disease that are currently on the label, even from earlier applications than we currently have permitted by the label.
So a couple of questions now sort of related on a similar theme to the application and storage. So can Maxim be applied before going into store, or should it be kept until seed comes out of store in spring?
At the moment, our label wouldn't cover you for applying going into store. People do it, we know that, but our main constraints that you have are tubers after lifting are often rather muddy to make successful applications to. That can be an issue, and we have seen that issue in the past.
Thank you. And is dormancy in seed important at time of application? And also, would you apply Maxim to potatoes which have their eyes opening?
The label states that we should apply to dormant seed, and that is undoubtedly the safest thing to do. But if you ask me whether I've seen people who've applied it later than that and it's been successful, then they can do it. The main criteria to be careful of is the overall quality and vigor of those seed tubers. If you have seed tubers that are perhaps not being well handled, perhaps suffering from damage, physiologically aged, then it'll be less successful. The problem you have in the potato seed business is there are an awful lot of variables. You've got an awful lot of things happening with how the seed is grown, how it's then handled, how it's then stored, how it's then treated. So giving black and white answers on these things is very, very difficult, because there are so many factors in addition to that one small factor, which is the application of the tuber treatment, that can impact how that treated seed finally behaves when you replant it.
Thank you, Michael. And so a question around, can Maxim be applied to cut seed?
Cutting seed, very much an American practice, has come to this country to some extent. We have no real experience or recommendations regarding applying Maxim to cut seed. I think I would be very wary of that one.
Thank you. Well, that appears to be sort of final open question at the moment. I'll give it a few seconds, see if any more come in. Okay, so someone's just come back on a question that they did submit. So this is around the recommendation. So the question now is, does someone with a basis qualification need to recommend a chemical before it's applied?
I think you do. I think you always need to have someone who's qualified with basis to recommend use of crop protection products, as far as I'm aware anyway, yeah.
Thank you. And sort of the final question then is, what is the best practice for handling seed after application? Into boxes, bags, dry walling?
I think you've got, again, it comes back to the kind of the many different things that happen with the way that seed tubers are managed. I think you definitely need to have an ability to dry them to some extent post-application, depending again on what your mix volume is and how dry the tubers are when you treat them. If they're pretty dry and they remain pretty dry, you can get away with more. I would be careful about putting them into bags if they're damp, because that's potential for problem, and you therefore a drying wall or something like that wouldn't be a bad idea. So I think it's one of these questions that you have to look at the system that you're operating in, the condition of the tubers that you've got, when you're actually treating them, and how they come out of that treatment area. Because nobody wants to develop soft rots because they've got too much water on, or you haven't given the tubers an adequate chance to dry off before they're being stored. So I know that's not a tremendously satisfactory answer, but there is no absolutely, there's no absolutely one answer that will cover this. It requires management. This is what I mentioned earlier on. It requires more management to use this product than it would do to use a dust product. But there are advantages from having this sort of product available in terms of the quality that you can deliver of the seed tubers.
Thank you very much. Again, another question has just been sort of followed up, but I think we'll probably pick that one up individually, have a conversation with that person. So I think that's come to the end of our session today. So just like to thank firstly everybody for joining us today. I'd like to thank Harry and Michael for their input in terms of presentations and answering the questions. Hope you enjoyed the event. So information on how to apply for basis and error points will be sent in a follow-up email, which you should get tomorrow. And you'll also get a link to a survey. So we'd really love to have your feedback on sort of today and how you viewed today's session. So hopefully we'll see most, if not all of you again tomorrow. So tomorrow it's soil pest management. So again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you then.
Thanks everyone.